So we are so excited to have Chris speak to us a little bit about Outreach Haiti, who is a current parishioner. But as you guys have noticed, for those who may or may not know John Dutton, but he was a St. Peter's parishioner for years and is fled back south. So we welcome you, John, and thank you for joining us this morning. As y'all know, Outreach Haiti was one of our recipients of the Easter offering. So we are excited to get an update from you guys and hear a little bit about what you're going to do in June and go visit. So I will turn it over to you guys.
Great. Okay. Yeah, John and I are going to do a little tag team this morning. Of course, it was John who introduced us, St. Peter's, to this operation, and John and Jacqueline and I made a trip down there the summer of 2018, I think, was when we made that, and that was our first introduction to it. And we've been working to be associated with it for and the consortium of churches that are working with John ever since. It's been everything with Haiti is a challenge, and we've had a variety of our challenges. We did make another trip down in 2019, and then we planned for another trip in 2020 to get some of the projects that Perbana had requested down there and getting them started up. And this was actually before pandemic, and it was not before they had a lot of civil unrest going on down there. And so our folks told us not to come. It wasn't a good time. So we had to keep putting it off. And then January came and the pandemic was upon us. And so we couldn't go down. So we're really anxious to get back there. It's been a while. John is the chairman of the board, and he is the primary contact with Perbana and the school, and our interpreter, Sam Drummond, when we're down there. I'm not sure, did anybody hear that echo? Anyway, so what we're gonna do today is I'm gonna kick this off with a little bit of a introduction as to how this mission came about, and then turn it over to John to cover really sort of, you know, the operational aspects of it, what he's doing personally in their church and what other churches are doing to manage this. Let me see. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will be quick. I think, yeah, share that. Share my desktop. And okay, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. This is on the walk that we make into Petit Harpon when we're down there, and I have been learning my history on Haiti, but and as you all know, it's got quite a storied and disturbing history in a lot of respects. But the name Haiti is from the Creole, that is the indigenous language, and it means land of high mountains, or it translates to land of high mountains. And as you can see, there's a lot of that down there. What you see in the distance with those two gentlemen standing there is the church that they built in 2013, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. They're standing right outside of the school. So you don't probably need to speak an awful lot of French to know that Petit Harpon is probably something small. And to say that it is a town is overly generous. If it weren't for the school and the church, this would just be one great big rural community among these mountains. But one of the most exciting things we do when we're down there is go to church with these folks. And obviously, there's not a lot of cars coming down this road. This is not a road that cars travel down, but an awful lot of people all dressed up for Sunday service walk down through all of these paths and roads and meet at that church on the hill. And it's quite a sight to behold, as is the services. John will talk a little bit about that maybe later. But this just sort of gives you a sense of the neighborhood. A lot of people, when you think about Haiti, you don't necessarily think about these wide open spaces, but there are a lot of wide open spaces there. And that's really what makes this particular mission particularly meaningful, I think, to those of us that are involved in it, and the people there as well. So I like to start with geography because I'm a visual learner. I need to see where things are. So this is the western part of the island, which is Haiti. This was the French part of the island. On the right-hand side or the east side is the Spanish part, the Dominican Republic. There is a pretty solid border in between those two countries. Just to give you a sense of where we are talking about, so Port-au-Prince is right here at the junction of the northern and the southern islands. You can see I've got a red square here and Petit Harpon written on it. Petit Harpon does not occur on this map. That isn't a good approximation of where it is. You can follow along this road from Port-au-Prince to Léogâne. Typically, when they refer to Petit Harpon, there's a comma and then Léogâne. So Léogâne is a relatively large city. This whole area along here is just one kind of sprawl, suburban sprawl, if you will, from Petit Harpon. But from Léogâne, it's probably another half hour uphill, all uphill, to the drop-off point for Petit Harpon. You can drive in there if you've got a four-wheel drive vehicle and a lot of patience, but it takes as much time to spend 40 minutes or 45 minutes or so and just walk in, which is what typically we do when we go to Petit Harpon. I also have an arrow down here on the southern coast for Jacmel. Jacmel is a relatively large city, and as you can see, it's right on the coast. It's actually an extremely beautiful part of the island. And when we go on our trips, Jacmel is where we stay. There's a hotel there, and that's on the coast, and they take very, very good care of us. And then we spend our nights there and then drive up typically to Petit Harpon every morning. And this gives you a sense of the school. So this is here in the upper left-hand corner. I can't tell. I think it's about 8 to 10 classrooms. It's all open. There are no windows in here, and relatively Spartan utilities in here. I mean, there's no So just so you know, there's no electricity here. There's no running water here. They do have a very good roof here, a good roof system, so that allows them to collect rainwater. And there's a cistern underneath the what they call the rector's house, which is adjacent to, actually, I think you can see it a little bit in this picture right down here with these two girls walking. So that's where they get their water. And this is out in the countryside. And so just to kind of give you a sense, this all started back in 1995, and this is a picture of Ann Aiken, and she's still very actively engaged in this mission. But she is an artist and on a mission project to Port-au-Prince in 1995, she and a group of other parishioners from Good Shepherd were there, and it was an art school for kids. Now, 1995 was a particularly tough time for Haiti. The Aristide government had just been elected, the first democratically elected president of the country, and within weeks, a military junta had overthrown it. And so, in that period of time, there was a UN mission that came and occupied Haiti to negotiate the return of the Aristide government. And in the meantime, there was a lot of UN forces there. U.S. was well represented, and there were a lot of investment, a lot of infrastructure, roads, bridges, and building schools, things of that nature. And so the Bishop of Haiti, and by the way, for a fun fact for everybody, Haiti is and remains the largest Episcopal diocese in the world. So there's a lot of Episcopal churches down there, a lot of Catholics, but the Episcopal diocese is well represented there. In any event, the Bishop of Haiti learned that Anne was more than an artist. She was also an architect, and asked if she would design a school for him. And he was thinking that he'd be able to get it funded by the UN mission, and so that would be a way that they'd do it. And the point was that he came from this small community of Petit Harpon, and realized that there was a church there, but there was no school, and it was very difficult. Anybody who was going to get educated needed, there was no place, within a morning's walk to be able to get to a school. So he asked if she would design a school that he'd hopefully get built. And that wasn't, well, so Anne knew through a lot of her work, these two fellows, Jim Hudson, he owns a construction company. If I'm right, John, he has built an awful lot of McDonald's restaurants around the country. And another guy, civil engineer Lou Garcia, who has since passed away, but the three of them basically designed this school. And when they realized that it was not going to get funded, they raised money, got the materials, purchased the materials, shipped them to Port-au-Prince, and ultimately were the ones who built the school. And so there's this really cool legend. It's a legend because it's kind of gone from generation to generation among the community of Petit Harpon. But so the challenge here, you've seen the countryside, and the materials for the school got packed up in the U.S. and shipped down in a container. And in fact, in this particular container right here that you see in the lower left-hand corner, it was in Port-au-Prince, but it was a long time ago, and they did not. There was not a really good way to get that container to the mountain. And so they were trying to figure that out. And this fellow is the retired bishop of Tennessee, Bill Squire. And he had just recently retired and was currently in Haiti, working with Children's Hospital Mission in Haiti. And through his work there, he happened to know the head of the UN mission, who was a US Army person. And they were able to negotiate air transit of that container via helicopter, which they happened to have some of down there during the UN mission or the UN occupation. And they came in and they dropped that container pretty much right where it sits right there. It was quite an occurrence for the folks in the neighborhood. They were, you know, everybody was there watching this big container come floating up over the mountainside. Of course, the houses that were in the area also suffered a fair amount of roof damage with the downdraft from this thing. So the first building projects that they did after they got the container there was to repair the roofs of some of these houses that got blown away by this helicopter. But in any event, you talk to the children there today, and they know about where that container came from, and they know about the helicopter. So it's kind of how this whole thing sort of came to be. And from that, you know, Outreach Haiti was formed, and the mission was very focused on educating the children of Petit Harpon. And that's what it was. The school was started in 1999. Outreach Haiti became the primary source of funding. They do collect tuition from kids based on the or kids' parents based on the ability to pay. But by and large, I would say that Outreach Haiti covers 95% probably of the costs of educating these kids. And that was their focus up until the 2010 earthquake. What you see on the left-hand side is the church that the community had built over the years. It had taken years to build this because all of the concrete from this came up from Leogane on donkeys. It took long. All the rocks apparently were all from the area, but it was all basically rocks and concrete. But the earthquake in 2010, as you can see on the upper right-hand side, this was, you know, the epicenter of this was right very near Petit Harpon, Port-au-Prince, this whole area here. And so the church was essentially fully destroyed. There was no way they were going to be able to rebuild this. You can see down here sort of a shot from up where the school is, what was left of the church after that earthquake. Now, Jim and Lou and Ann had designed and built a really solid structure. And as it turns out, the school was completely untouched by this earthquake, which was just, you know, 100 yards away from or so from where this church was. So structurally, the school was fine, and they weren't going to have any trouble. The church, as you can see, was in big trouble. And they decided that they were going to expand their mission to include doing something to rebuild this church. And this is what basically Jim Hudson did or led. And this is an entirely metal building. Again, all of the metal and structural steel came from the US via container. And which is what is typical with the work that Outreach Haiti does down here, is that there will be people from Outreach Haiti that help lead and organize the work, but the work is done by local folks. If we've got to paint, we make sure we get brushes there, we get paint there and whatever, but we hire folks from the community to basically do the work. And that's what was the case here. These are Haitians building this church. You can see as it's partially erected in the upper right-hand corner. And this is the way it looks today. So all metal. And basically one of the things that we'll talk about a little later is there's no way you can build anything with wood down here. Not that you can't find wood, and not to say that you can't find wood structures, but there are an awful lot of termites on the mountain. And actually, my first visit down, we were looking at what things we might have to do in the church, and there was a crack. A small crack in the foundation right about here, and you could see a termite path all the way up in underneath the foundation, or the lower siding here of the church, and right up to the communion rail. And there, the communion rail is getting all eaten up by termites. It was crazy. Anyway, so they expanded the mission then to include the church. And this gives you a little bit of a look of what it is like inside there today. Really awesome church. John was part of the group that was able to find pews from a decommissioned church in the U.S. and get them shipped down, brought up on the mountain, and installed in the church. So that's kind of what it looks like today. And also what they decided to add is a clinic. And John will talk a little bit more about this, but I think this is Cameron Ellis, right? And Cameron leads the mission from St. Stephen's Church, which is focusing primarily on the medical mission associated with this. So that there is a small clinic there. This gentleman was put through school by St. Stephen's, through medical school, and has served at various times as a temporary doctor in residence. They have nurses come up, but this is one of the only places where the community can get medical assistance. So that's kind of how it got to where it is today. Robert Childress, the rector of Good Shepherd, has kind of referred to this overall mission as sort of all-encompassing mind, body, and spirit. So the educational aspect of it, the clinic part of it, and including the church in it as well, because obviously without Outreach Haiti, there probably still wouldn't be a local church there. So with that, John became the board, the chair of the board, I guess, about the same time that I got invited to join from St. Peter's. So John has been leading this effort and coordinating all of us. And I'll turn it over to you now, John.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And it is good to see everybody. The way I became the chairman of the board was actually at that hotel at Jacmel. We were sitting outside having a Prestige, which is Haitian beer. And somebody asked about 10 o'clock one night, do you want to do it? And I said, sure. And then here I am. So, but it's been a lot of fun. It's a great community thing. And it's all about relationships. And so you see there the 14-member board, it's people from all over, different churches, different backgrounds, different denominations, North Georgia, all the way up into Virginia and St. Louis. And so, but it's really a conglomerate of people who've been impacted or touched or been to the community and built relationships with the folks down there over the years. It's run through Church of the Good Shepherd, which is on Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, just outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's where Ann Aiken was a member, and so on. So it's been years and years and years in the making. And I see a hand up, so I want to be sure. It looks like Donna. Do you have a question, Donna? Something you want to ask? I was going to say let's pull up, and I want to be sure we talk about.
No, I'm sorry. I accidentally hit the chat button. Sorry.
Okay, well, no, it's perfect timing because it reminds me, if you have something you want to say or want to hear more about, certainly chime in, raise your hand, or just chime in, and I'd like to make this as conversational as can be. So, Chris, do you want to then flip to the next slide here? So when you think about, again, the work of Outreach Haiti, the way I rationalize it, I guess, make it make sense in my head, is it's all about relationship, right? It is 100% relationship. Ann and some others built the school, as Chris said, beginning back in 95, 96, commissioned it in 99. And we've built long-standing relationships in that community. And over the years, we've seen various bishops of Haiti. We've seen various priests that have been kind of responsible for the community. But it's all about relationship. And it's so exciting to see the kids grow up. My first time going was in 2009. And so it was neat, Chris, when Chris and I and Jacqueline were there a couple of years ago. We had a group that came in and they sang in the church, and these were adults, these were young adults, young men that had grown up in the community, and several of them, are recognized from years before, when they were just little things running around the school. So you think about that connection, and then the connection that we all have in our walk with Christ, in our role as in our churches, about building and facilitating relationships with each other. I just think it's a great connection with a community in Haiti and multiple parishes from around the U.S. That are all focused on relationship with each other. So that's exciting to me. And I know certainly looking at you all's mission, it's connected for sure. So the next couple of slides are just some details on the school. So we run the school on about $50,000 a year. As Chris mentioned, they do collect tuition, and one of the things that they just did with the tuition, we pay the teachers and we feed the kids with contributions from us, from Outreach Haiti, that we collect. Anything that the school receives in terms of tuition, the priest there, his name is Per Bana, he will, Father Per Bana Willie is his name. He will use that money for improvements at the school. And so, for example, he just did a partnership with the Red Cross, and they put in latrines outside the school and kind of fixed up the bathrooms a bit. So he'll use that money. But primarily what we do is we'll support the teachers. We pay the teachers and feed the kids. And it is roughly $50,000 a year. We send down just under $5,000 a month via wire transfer, and we send it for typically 10 months. This past year with COVID, we sent it down for all 12 because we wanted to make sure that the teachers were continued to get paid, and we actually continue to feed folks there in the community through the priest. We have an endowment that was started several years ago. Through a fundraiser. We had a fun night one night and raised a lot of money, at the time it was about $500,000. And it's since grown to about 700,000. And so we take a draw off of that, which is typically around 25,000 a year. And then the remaining 25,000 we raise just through individual contributions through churches and so on. So thank you all, for your commitment at the Easter offering. It is really exciting to see the partnership with y'all. The next few slides, I think, yeah, these are just some of the works that we do. So we'll typically go down and as Chris mentioned, we'll pay the local community. One thing that we'll do when we go in June, and Chris will talk a little bit more about that trip, is we'll paint the outside of the school. I hadn't seen it in a couple of years, and I know it needed it a couple of years ago, so I'm sure it's going to need it again. So we'll employ folks there in the community to paint. We'll do things like termite remediation. That's the altar rail in the church. Just punch list kind of things. But we try to employ the Haitians as much as we can to do the work. We're not a medical mission. Our work is primarily about construction and supporting the school. There is, like Chris mentioned, there's a CDC they built a clinic there years ago. And that clinic has since moved into the church, and it's staffed by the gentleman that you saw in the photo a few minutes ago, who actually grew up in the school. So it was cool to see him go through the school and then to medical school. And then he was a doctor there. He lived in Jacmel, spent a couple of years in Philadelphia, but is now back, and he's talking to some folks about becoming a full-time doctor there again. So we'll see how that goes. The challenge with it is it's hard to make money, right? I mean, you can be a doctor in a rural community in Haiti, and everybody's thankful for the work, but it's nobody can pay you for the work. And so that's one of the challenges that he faces. There's a nurse, though, that goes up there a couple days a week. It's actually a sister who was also sent through nursing school by some folks in Outreach Haiti. Again, more pictures. I love the before and after picture here of a chalkboard. So there's a hardware store kind of close to the place we stay in Jacmel. So most days when we head in to up the mountain, we'll swing by the hardware store and pick up what may be needed. Usually it's hardware for putting together desks and repairing desks and painting blackboards or new paint brushes or what have you. The guy there sanding or planing down that door is another kid that grew up there in the church. His father is actually I kind of say the custodian, and now he's kind of taken those reins in the community. And so he's working right outside of the school. That's outside one of the classrooms as we're putting in wooden doors. Another thing we do, again, I mentioned it's about relationships, right? It's about listening. It's about getting to know the people in the community. It's the picture in the top left is a couple of us visiting with Père Bana, again, who's the priest in charge there in the community. The guy on the right in the blue shirt is a translator that we've used for the last several years. He actually grew up in that community as well, not at the school, but I guess across the other side of the community. And then the fellow in the middle is Robert Childers, again, who's the rector at Good Shepherd. And that's, Père Bana talking about his vision, talking about what he would like to see with the school. The gentleman on the far right was a kid that grew up there in the school. And there he is visiting with a guy named Frank McDonald. Frank was one of the original folks that went back in 96 or 90, I guess 97, 98, 99 to help build the school itself. Frank's an architect as well. And then the one at the bottom down there, it was an interesting day. That was probably a 3-hour conversation in the church. And there was a community issue that needed to be addressed. And Père Bana elicited Robert Childers, again, the priest at Good Shepherd, for advice. And several members sitting in the pews there were vestry members of the church. And they had some things that they needed to work out. And it was neat to see the engagement with the folks there in the church, and then Robert providing advice, and Père Bana through the translator really mentoring and encouraging the vestry. So that was a meaningful day, to say the least. The food. So as Chris mentioned, we feed the folks there day in and day out. It costs about 40 cents per student per day. Typically, it's rice, beans, and a protein. So think chicken, think beef, think fish. They source all of the food every day. They'll go to market and get the food and bring it back. Of course, the rice and stuff they keep there, but the protein they'll bring in typically day in and day out. It's cooked typically frankly, it's staffed by ladies that are there in the community, and a couple of guys that are on the vestry as well, that are there day in and day out to cook the food. They cook it over charcoal. Kids bring their own bowls and spoons, and they fill them up, and they eat and they eat and they eat, and then they go home. And a lot of times you'll see kids leaving with a bowl of food too to take back home. Most kids, this is their meal for the day. So it's important that we continue to keep them going. And the mission, like we said, is all about education. And the thought is you're going to learn when you are well fed and when the nutrition's there. If the nutrition's not there, then they're not going to learn. So we do the work visits, and I'll let Chris kind of talk about our next trip. But we typically go down, and we each will pay our own airfare down. We try to limit the money that comes out of Outreach Haiti to go to the school. So we will pay our own airfare down and split the hotel rooms up and just split, food. So it works out to be about $1,500. I'd say that's on the high side per person for a trip. The bulk of that's going to be the airfare. And then Outreach Haiti will pay for like the paint and such. But we pay, we'll stay the 4 to 7 days in Jacmel, and that's the view from the hotel in Jacmel. It's really a gorgeous, gorgeous place, and have good meals at night and talk about the day. I mean, there's all kinds of lobster that they collect, the Caribbean lobster out of that bay, and really Jacmel is famous for its lobster. So it's nice to spend a busy, hot day up on the mountain and then come down off the mountain and enjoy lobster. We used to stay in Laogon and decided that we wanted to stay somewhere a little bit more fun. So like Chris mentioned, every day we'll drive up the mountain, and we will typically walk to the school. That's the group heading down the trail to the school. A lot of times on the way back, we'll stop by a market and pick up fresh fruit, mango, oranges, or what have you. Yeah, again, about an hour walk, views are free. It's neat to see the houses and everybody waving and saying hello. They remember you from year in and year out as you continue to go back. Interesting to see the agriculture there. I mean, the pictures don't give it justice. It is amazing to think about how steep that is. I mean, it is sheer drop-offs, and they somehow or another make it work for agriculture. And you get to see a lot of wildlife too, the pigs and chickens, and it's just a lot of fun. And those are some of the pictures of the houses. And so you can imagine, a Huey helicopter with 2 big rotors flying in and what it would do to a house there. And then when you walk in, again, you look at the school and then up over the hill down to the church. And when you see that little jut out in the church on the far right, that's the clinic. That's the new clinic that was built. Any questions? I know we're getting short on time, so I want to be sure that we answer any questions that anybody here may have.
There's about 200 students there.
215 students enrolled.
Yeah, I calculated that from the $100 a day divided by 40 cents a meal.
Yep, that's
an
spot on.
engineer there. Way
Good
to go,
stuff.
Jeff. Yeah, Linda, you had a question?
What economy in the little area? I mean, what jobs do people have that live there, and how many of the students stay there? And
It's
actually, 3
agriculture.
questions, and then how many go on to higher education after the school? 3 questions. Sorry.
No, good. So
All
it's
good
agriculture.
questions.
Yep, it's 100% agriculture there in the community, and so it's sustaining a living. You know, they'll raise peas or chickens or cows and then take it to market day in and day out, and so that's the bulk of it. When with the school, like the majority of the kids go back into agriculture within their family, just to be frank with you. I'd say on average about 20% would go on to secondary school or to college. One of the things that we want to start doing is tracking that, you know, and really knowing, I guess, tracking our alumni better. The girl down there at the bottom with her arm around that gentleman, she's a nurse, and she came up through the school and now goes back into the community a couple of days a week as a nurse. And so there are examples like that. A lot of people that do go on to higher education go into Port-au-Prince or to Leogane and build careers there.
That's one of the things that Perbana wants to do, I guess, is to also to add all of the classes necessary to graduate people from high school at this school. And that's one of the things we'll talk about on the trip down there. It's a lot easier said than done. It's not all that cost effective unless you have enough students to fill it up. And so it may make more sense to pay tuition for them to go somewhere else, but that's the whole point. Is Perbana would like, from the community's perspective, for them to be able to graduate from school in their own community without having to leave. But that's one of the things I know that we'll be discussing when we're down there.
Catherine, looks like you've got a question.
Yes, thank you. In some of the other work we're doing at St. Peter's related to our own relationship building within the St. Louis region and community, we've been talking about the importance in building those relationships of not coming in as though we have all the expertise, and that approach can actually cause harm. To that point, what have you learned? What has the mission groups, what have they gained and benefited from in terms of the wisdom and expertise that the community in Haiti has?
Yeah, so I think that philosophy is exactly where we are. There was a book that I read years ago, When Helping Hurts. I don't know if you've seen that, but I think that may be kind of where you're going. And
also, Toxic Charity is another title that required reading.
As Chris mentioned, you know, we don't typically we'll help organize the work and spur it on. But the idea and the goal here is really a self-sustaining community. And so they hire the priest there, hires the teachers. I mean, I think there's 36, 37 full-time employees at the school, whether it be teachers or administrative folks. And again, for $50,000 to employ 30 some odd people, 36, 37 people, and feed 215 kids. I always joke it's the best deal in the Northern Hemisphere. The girl there in the middle, again, she's a nurse that comes back to the school or to the community. The guy getting a hug there is that carpenter that you saw shaving the boards. And so the goal is self-sustaining, not enabling.
I hear that. My own experience was in the church in Tanzania in the early 80s or the late 80s when I was young. And I realized years later when I did an MBA that I had learned key leadership skills from Tanzanian members of that diocese, especially around social networking, influence, managing difficult conversations. So I hear that this is being kind of run and sustainable, but I'm also curious about what wisdom you've benefited from the folks within Haiti's culture.
I would say probably one of the, just to go back as an example to that 3-hour-long community conversation that we were entitled to listen to, and they wanted us to listen to it, and they asked us to be there, asked basically Robert Childress and Ann to be there and be part of the conversation. And it was a very difficult conversation with just the same kind of things that you would imagine would occur in a church. One of the guys who worked at the church was the father of several children, but had never managed to marry or decided to marry the mother. And he sometimes stayed with them and sometimes stayed at the church. And there were a lot of people at the church who didn't think that the church should hire or pay this guy who was not willing to marry the mother of his children. And so how do you deal with that? And to the extent that he was receiving death threats from members of the congregation. So how do you deal with that? We sure couldn't solve that. This is something that Perbana and the vestry was dealing with, and we didn't leave with a solution. But he needed to be able to have a forum for that discussion with his vestry members there, with the gentlemen there, and even our interpreter played a major role because we don't do so great in Creole. So we weren't there to solve it. We were there to be able to sort of provide an opportunity for them to have an open conversation with the community. So I'm not sure, I don't know that I have really great answers because I haven't been there nearly as long as John, but the whole sustainability aspect of this, we have to look at it from a very long-term perspective, because when we talk about an economy, it's a barter economy. It's subsistence farming. There is not much of an economy there, and it's going to take generations of support. And this is, of course, it's a relatively big country, and the biggest economy that is there is mission work. So there are a lot of much broader sort of global issues at play here that we'll never be able to solve. We'll be able to, people like Sam, our interpreter, though, was one of those success stories who grew up in the area, grew up in the community, and his education in college was paid for by some folks in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he went to college there and then went back. And he and his wife and new daughter are helping build communities down there now. His wife is in medical school, and he is an interpreter. He works for nonprofits, and he's also a youth minister. And so he's part of the community. I look to those kind of things as sort of the long-term impact on the community, and as John says, the relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say just real quick, I think how it's hit me and how it's impacted me specifically is it's really brought to life this power of love and power of relationships. I never will forget the first time I went down there. I brought home pictures of kids and that I had gotten to know, and Ginger said, "I wish you could have brought him home." And I said, "Ginger, his mama loves him. She dropped him off at school this morning. She loves him dearly. She doesn't want him to come home with me." And so just the power of those family units there and how much they adore each other is beyond belief. And then the power of relationships between congregations, between, nationalities. It's just, I wish I could put it into words and articulate it. But Chris mentioned that day, that'll forever be ingrained in my mind, those 3 hours. So that's what it means to me. And that's what I get back. And then when I was sitting in St. Peter's on the second pew on the right-hand side that morning, when the bishop spoke, Bishop Curry spoke, he was talking about love. And I was thinking about Haiti, the whole time. So,
Chris, why don't you mention something about the project that you're working on now to help with sustainability?
Sure. Okay. Let me. So we call this Parabana's chicken growing project. Parabana has a degree in agriculture, and on my first trip down there, he had an idea of wanting to be able to start a project that would allow them to grow chickens to supplement their lunch program, and also to teach kids something about livestock and livestock rearing. And so this took a while to kind of figure out, because he was talking eggs initially, and when it came down to it, he was describing to me the food that is important. We were talking about, well, we could replace some of the goat and the fish, which are really expensive, with eggs, and that protein then would equal up, and it'll be able to go farther. And he said that the Haitian culture requires that anything they eat have at least the memory of meat in it, which I thought was a fantastic description of it. But it needs to have some sort of taste of meat in it, whether it's got very much of it there or not. And so I figured that what he really needed, or would be happier with, was something where he could eat the chickens as opposed to just eat the eggs. So we talked about that. He agreed that was a great idea. And we've worked on with the people who basically built or provided the metal, I guess, for the church, place Erectus Shelters down in Arkansas. We went down, talked with them about what I was trying to get accomplished for a chicken shed. We basically put together a design that would fit on this foundation right here. This is a foundation it was a dormitory for teachers before the 2010 earthquake. The earthquake, as you can see, basically leveled them. But this still exists here, and it's right outside. It's inside the security fencing around the school. Actually, so today, Parabana has turned this area into a sort of a demonstration garden to teach the kids how to grow stuff. And our plan now is to get this chicken shed erected right here. That'll produce about 3,000 pounds of chicken a year if we get it working. And it will produce about 2,000 pounds of manure. So good fertilization for the subsistence farming around the area. The main thing that has to happen, apart from taking care of these and getting this built and taking care of the chickens, is we got to get feed from somewhere. And there is a place, Jamaica Broilers has a business down in Haiti, just north of Port-au-Prince, referred to as Haiti Broilers. We visited there. They have a hatchery. We can get day-old chicks there, and we can get feed there. As I said, there's no running water up on this mountain. So we'll have to get water from their rain-fed cistern. But the primary thing that we came up with is a plan to make this work. There's nobody that owns any vehicles in Petit Harpon. So they need somebody to deliver feed and chickens to them. And so we agreed, we worked with Sam because he wanted to have he was listening to all of the discussion around this and was hoping that he could set something up for the people in his church as well. So we're basically providing the capital for two chicken sheds, and he'll provide the delivery of feed to both places, and also help us with the training and making sure we understand what's going on. These are some drawings of what the shed looks like. First of all, everything has to be metal because of the termites. This is sort of the floor plan. It looks a lot like the very simple, an entryway that contains the feed, a separate screened in area with the feed. This will all be chicken growing area here. No electricity, so the ventilation has to be ambient. So that there's screened sides of the side of the building, keep vermin out, keep birds out, and be able to allow good air passage. It's only 10 feet wide, so we should be able to keep it ventilated okay. Roof that's insulated so that it doesn't heat up too much. Also large overhang so that we don't get too much sun going into the sides of these buildings. The chickens need to be able to stay out of the sun. And we also put a rain collection system on top of the roof so that when it does rain, and it does rain there, we'll be able to collect the water that they can from the back. There probably won't be enough to feed all of these chickens, about 200 chickens at a time. But between this and the big cistern at the school, we feel like we should be able to do it. This project, along with the pavilion on the front of the school, resides in a container somewhere in Port-au-Prince, which we don't know where it is right now because the guy who received it died of COVID. That is number one on our list when we get down to Port-au-Prince in June to take a look at that. Speaking of that, this is what the itinerary looks like for our trip down. A group of us are going to go down early to spend a day and a half in Port-au-Prince with a security guard. I'm glad to hear that. To go around to the various places we can think of with our translator and see if we can scare up the container and get that organized so that we can get it back to the Petit Harpon community and start scheduling trips to get it erected and get that project started up.
Chris, I think we're at time. So yeah, I know everybody's got to get to church. So thank you all so much. Chris, if they want have questions, reach out to you. Is that the best route?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Happy to talk with anybody about any of this.
And I just wanted to thank Chris and thank John for sharing all this information with us. I will also send out to the participants some of this information. They have a Facebook page, please, visit it, comment, like it so that we can share it with others on our feed if you're on Facebook. And I will include some of this other information. But really, I think as I've talked to a lot them about this, the best way for us to help Outreach Haiti is by funding and by donating and then let them spend our money.
Well, yeah, and if anybody ever wants to go, that's where you'll get. You're more than welcome.
I know Jacqueline's dying over there. She's just salivating. Yes. So also helping and funding someone to go through the organization, but just word of mouth and excitement around the project, which I think is wonderful. So thank you.
A quick question. Is there a shortwave radio or a cell tower?
They all pretty much have cell towers there.
Yeah,
they have cell phones there, right? Yeah. Actually, that was one of the things.
Building that back up after the earthquake is Digicel is all over Haiti. There'd be nothing else other than cell service.
Great. Any other questions, guys, before we hop off? And some of us go
good. This was great. Thank you for doing this.
Most welcome. And I guess I don't think we showed the slide about what is it? It costs like $125 a year for tuition, something like that. Did we show that slide?
Yeah. It was that one on that one with the food. So
I have a question about education, more about the teachers and how much training they have at the different levels, how many come back to the community to work in it, what the curriculum is like.
So the curriculum, great question. The curriculum is really a lot like the curriculum in the US. And so the teachers have a rigorous training that they have to go through with the Haitian Department of Education. The Haitian Department of Education they are constantly adding new things, new hoops that we have to jump through, which is good because they know the importance of education across the country. Most of the teachers live in Port-au-Prince or Legon, and so they go back and forth every day, which is about a 3-hour trek, day in and day out. But yeah, the teachers are all accredited and trained in Haiti. Most of them aren't from Petit Harpon; they're from Port-au-Prince.
I saw a dormitory in one of your drawings. Is that no longer extant?
Yeah, it was a dorm years ago, and it was something that was built there from the Haitians to give the teachers a place to stay overnight, and it went the way of the earthquake. So that picture of the church that you saw, the dorm, kind of had similar fate, and that pad that Chris was talking about, where we're going to put the chicken house, is the pad that once housed the teacher's dorm. And frankly, the transportation has gotten better over the years. And so most of them would prefer to go home day in and day out versus stay on the mountain.
I have to ask about the uniforms and the picture of the children, the little green and white check dresses. I mean, do they wear those every day?
They do.
Yes, they do. It's incredible. So look, there's no electricity except passive solar. There's no running water, but I got to tell you, those uniforms, and when these people get ready and they go to church, everything is starched, pressed, cleaned. It is incredible the amount of work they put into making sure that they look great. And it's really emotional to see. To me anyway, to see experience that. Not to mention a church service. That is worth the price of admission to get down there. To spend 3 hours with these folks on Sunday is awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Okay, guys, I may have to end the meeting for all because I have church.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks again, guys. We'll
Good
talk to you soon. Bye.
You bet. Bye.
Bye.